All right, so are you ready to dive into something pretty crazy?
I think so.
Today we're going to Saudi Arabia,
Oh, wow.
out in the desert.
Okay.
They are trying to build a megacity called the Line.
I've heard about
It's
this.
basically like a skyscraper on its side. It's going to be 170 kilometers long.
That is bonkers.
So we've got this awesome YouTube video.
Oh,
It breaks down some satellite imagery, and it's got like a bunch of expert opinions. And the reality on the ground, well, let's just say it might be a little different from how they're trying to sell it.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, anytime you have a project this big, uh, going to run into problems.
Totally. So tell us a little bit about the line. Like, what is the vision?
Okay, so the line itself is going to be 500 meters tall,
Yeah.
200 meters wide. And it's supposed to house like 9 million people.
9 million people.
Yeah. And, it's really Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
MBS.
Yes, MBS. It's a part of his Vision 2030 plan. He wants to, move Saudi Arabia away from just depending on oil.
Right, because that's their big thing right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they want to turn it into a tech hub, a tourism destination, and everything's powered by renewable energy.
Which would be incredible if they can actually pull it off.
Of course.
But, I've seen some of those satellite images, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like they're mostly working on just a small section. They're calling it the hidden marina.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is pretty much, empty.
Oh, wow.
So it just makes you wonder, how achievable is this? I mean, is this just too ambitious?
That's the big question, right? I mean, it's great they want to go with renewables,
For sure.
especially because they're so reliant on fossil fuels right now.
Yeah.
But think about it, the scale of this thing, the construction alone is going to have a massive environmental impact. I mean, you've got to think about the carbon footprint,
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't matter how the city ends up getting powered if the construction itself is a huge polluter.
Right.
And then there's the problem of water.
Yep.
We're in the desert.
Yes.
Water is scarce. So what are they going to do? They're talking about desalination plants.
Ah, yeah, but those have their own set of problems.
Oh, totally. Break that down for us.
Okay, so desalination.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically taking the salt out of seawater. But it takes a ton of energy to do that.
Yeah.
And then you've got all this leftover super salty water. What do you do with that?
You can't just dump it back in the ocean.
No, you can't. That can wreck the whole ecosystem. So even if they use renewable energy for those plants, the environmental cost is still pretty big.
Yeah, I didn't think about the leftover saltwater problem before.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Okay, but let's put aside the environment for a second, because we also have to think about, the human cost.
Oh, yeah.
This whole project is causing the Huitat tribe to be displaced.
Mm-hmm.
They're the indigenous people who actually live in that area.
Yeah.
And they're being forced out. And the reports that we're seeing are pretty concerning.
Mm-hmm.
We hear about these forced evictions, a real lack of transparency from the government. Yeah. About what they're going to do for these communities, about how they're going to compensate them or relocate them.
Yeah, it's a tough reminder that these huge projects always have a cost, and someone has to pay it. And in this case, it seems like it's the Huitat tribe. Yeah. And, there was even that killing of one of the tribe members, Abdul Rahim al-Huwaid.
No.
He resisted being displaced.
Right.
And they killed him.
And that really, really brings to light the human cost of this project.
Absolutely. And it hasn't helped Saudi Arabia's human rights record.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah.
A lot more international scrutiny now. People are asking some tough questions about the methods being used to get this thing done.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just some theoretical architectural project. This is real. These are real people whose lives are being completely disrupted.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a bit here. Talk about the money. There's been a lot of talk about the financial side of things, some potential hurdles they might be facing.
Yeah, we're seeing reports of construction being scaled back.
Mm-hmm.
Costs are spiraling out of control. They say it's already 4 times the initial estimates.
4 times.
Yeah. And there are even whispers about funding potentially drying up.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time Saudi Arabia has had trouble with a mega project.
Right. Remember that Jeddah Tower?
Uh-huh. Supposed to be the tallest building in the world.
Exactly.
And what happened?
Stalled.
Yep. Back in 2018, funding issues. And they've only just started working on it again.
So we've got all these things going on, environmental concerns, human rights controversies, and now financial uncertainty. Is the line doomed? Or could the 2034 World Cup be the push they need?
Oh, that's an interesting point, because they're supposed to have a stadium ready for the World Cup at the Line.
Exactly. So could that be what saves it? I guess we're going to have to explore that in the next part of our deep dive. So back to the line.
Mm-hmm.
This city is just one long building.
170 kilometers?
It's pretty wild.
Like someone took a skyscraper
Yeah.
and just laid it down.
I've heard some people describe it like that.
But is this linear city model
Right.
a good idea? I mean, is it really viable?
Well, it's been tried before.
Oh, really?
Not on this scale, of
Of
course.
course not. This is unprecedented.
Yeah. But if history tells us anything, there's going to be some challenges.
Okay, so tell me, what are some of these historical precedents for linear cities? Like, what have people tried in the past?
Okay, so one example is from the late 1800s. There was this Spanish engineer, Arturo Soria y Mata,
Okay.
and he proposed the Ciudad Lineal.
Okay.
It was basically a tram line
Oh, wow.
running through Madrid, and it would have housing and businesses along both sides.
Interesting.
So the whole idea was to make the city more efficient, less congested,
Makes sense.
but only like 5 kilometers ended up actually getting built.
Oh, wow.
And eventually it just got absorbed by Madrid's growth.
So it was supposed to combat sprawl, but then it just got swallowed by straw.
Basically.
It's ironic.
Right. And there were other attempts, too.
Like what?
In the early 1900s, there was the road town concept.
What was that?
So they envisioned this underground monorail,
Okay.
and then above it, there'd be a pedestrian walkway
Okay.
with housing and services lining it.
Interesting.
And then later, in the 60s, there was the Jersey Corridor idea.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard about that.
So that one proposed rows of buildings,
Okay.
stretching from New Brunswick to Trenton,
Wow.
New Jersey.
That's a huge area.
And they even thought about extending it from Boston all the way to D.C.
Oh, wow. So like the whole Northeast Corridor would be one big linear city?
Yeah, that was the idea anyway.
Oh.
But none of these really took off.
No, they didn't.
And there's one example that I think is particularly relevant to the Blinding Night,
Okay, what's that?
Corvial.
Corvial. Okay.
It's this massive housing block in Rome,
Okay.
built in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a kilometer long.
Wow, a kilometer long.
And it was supposed to be a solution to Rome's housing shortage.
Oh.
But it pretty quickly became a symbol of urban decay and social isolation.
Oh, no, that's not good.
It's because of the design.
Yeah.
This long, imposing structure, limited access points,
Yeah.
it created this sense of being enclosed and separated from the rest of the city.
I can see how that would happen.
Yeah.
So with all these failed attempts, what lessons can the Lido line learn?
Well, I think the biggest one is that walkability and social interaction are super important.
Mm-hmm. You need people to be able to walk around
Exactly.
and run into each other.
Yeah, you want that bustling street life, the
Yeah.
chance encounters
Right.
that make a city feel alive.
And you don't get that in a linear city?
Not really, no. Traditional cities, they grow more organically in a circular pattern,
Mm-hmm.
so more people are within walking distance of each other.
Yeah.
But in a linear city, everything's stretched out.
Yeah.
Could be harder to create those public spaces.
The gathering points where
Right.
people come together.
Yeah, it's like the line could become a victim of its own efficiency.
I see what you mean.
So streamlined,
Yeah.
so optimized.
But it loses that human element.
Yeah, that chaotic energy.
That makes cities so vibrant.
Exactly.
And it's not just about physical movement.
No, it's about community,
Right.
a sense of belonging.
And in a linear city,
Mm-hmm.
it could be harder to build that.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about the psychology of it all.
Yeah.
Living in this enclosed space
Yeah.
in the middle of the desert.
Millions of people.
It's kind of claustrophobic just thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think there are some legitimate questions about the psychological well-being of the people who would live there.
I mean, would they feel isolated?
Yeah.
Even with all the fancy technology?
Possibly.
Would they feel disconnected from nature?
That's a real concern.
So this is something they really need to think about carefully.
They do.
But let's circle back to the 2034 World Cup. They're pushing to have a stadium ready. Could that pressure lead to them cutting corners?
Oh, definitely.
Especially when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, they might prioritize speed over everything else.
And end up sacrificing environmental practices.
It's possible.
So it's like this classic dilemma.
Hmm.
Ambition versus practicality.
And the clock is ticking.
And even if they manage to power the line entirely with renewables,
Yeah.
there's still the environmental cost of construction.
That's
All that concrete, steel, glass,
Mm-hmm.
all that requires energy to make and transport.
A lot of energy.
And we haven't even talked about the potential damage to the desert ecosystem.
Right. That's a whole other issue.
So yeah, it's
Okay.
easy to get swept up in the futuristic vision,
Uh-huh.
but we can't ignore the real impact on the environment.
Absolutely not.
Back again to the line.
This project is really something else.
Every time we learn something new,
Yeah.
it seems like there's another layer of complexity.
It really is a fascinating case study.
This vision of the future butting up against reality, construction, the environment, even what it would be like to live in a place like this.
It's all connected.
We talked about those linear cities from the past.
Right.
What went wrong?
Yeah.
That focus on efficiency, maybe at the expense of human connection,
Exactly.
and the environmental impact.
Even with renewable energy.
It's huge.
It is.
And then there's that World Cup deadline,
Looming over everything.
like a ticking time bomb.
It could make or break the line.
It could force them to cut corners, maybe sacrifice quality,
To get it done on time.
maybe even worker safety.
It's a possibility.
Imagine the World Cup
Yeah.
at a half-built construction site.
Not a good look.
Not exactly the futuristic utopia they're promising,
Nope.
and the whole world will be watching.
That's right.
Any problems will be magnified.
And it could scare off investors.
Hurt Saudi Arabia's reputation.
Absolutely.
It's a big gamble.
It is.
They're betting they can pull this off,
In time for the World Cup.
showcase their technology to the world.
A high-stakes gamble for sure.
But if they can do it,
Yeah.
it could be amazing.
The line could be a symbol of human ingenuity.
A model for sustainable living.
But if they fail,
It could be a disaster.
a monument to overspending.
Broken promises.
What if no one wants to live there?
That's a good question.
They could build this incredible city,
Saved all this money.
and it ends up empty.
A ghost town in the desert.
It's a possibility.
We're not just talking about buildings here.
No.
This is about creating a community,
Where people feel connected.
a sense of belonging.
And that's not something you can just engineer.
It's unpredictable,
You can build the city.
but you can't force people to love it.
That's the challenge.
So many questions. Will they meet the deadline?
Will they overcome the challenges?
Will the line succeed?
Or will it be a cautionary tale?
Only time will tell.
One thing's for sure, though.
What's that?
The line is a story that's still being written.
And we'll be watching.
It's going to fascinate us for years to come.
Well, we hope you learned something today.
About this crazy project.
The complexities,
The contradictions.
the future of cities,
The limits of technology.
and the choices we make.
As we shape our world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the line.